on the Supreme Court. Catholic Judge Amy Coney Barrett is sworn in as a justice on the nation's highest court. We look back at a day that made history. The final week, what both presidential campaigns are doing as Election Day draws closer. A new leader. After 4 years, Pope Francis names a Latin Patriarch for the Holy Land. And a doctor of the poor. New developments in the beatification process of a medical professional from Venezuela. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, October 27th, 2020. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Amy Coney Barrett is officially the newest Associate Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. The 48-year-old Catholic is the youngest justice since Clarence Thomas, who joined the court back in 1991 when he was 43. At a primetime swearing-in event at the White House, President Trump said her confirmation marked a momentous day for America. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports. Eric?
And that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
A night of celebration at the White House. Justice Clarence Thomas administered the constitutional oath to Amy Coney Barrett, the 103rd Associate Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. Her hand on a family Bible held by her husband, Jesse. Behind closed doors today, a private ceremony led by Chief Justice John Roberts as the newest justice took the judicial oath, paving the way for her to immediately begin her work on the court. She is President Trump's third Supreme Court justice in 4 years, a historic achievement he called a president's great honor and solemn obligation. He praised Justice Barrett for her judicial philosophy and making sure she will not legislate from the bench.
We ask God to give you wisdom and courage.
A stormy Senate confirmation process ended with a 52-48 vote in her favor, even as Democrats continue to voice their opposition.
My colleagues may regret this for a lot longer than they think. Generations yet unborn will suffer the consequences of this nomination.
But one Catholic commentator pointed to the pro-life undertones of Senator Chuck Schumer's words, tweeting, "Who's going to tell him?"
This is the most openly pro-life judicial nominee to the Supreme Court in my lifetime.
Justice Barrett was also championed on the Senate floor.
I am delighted to support her nomination. I am delighted to have someone of her convictions. I am delighted to have someone who has taken the stances that she has taken as a legal practitioner, as an academic, and as a judge. And yes, that includes her position on life, and yes, that includes her position on Roe.
Justice Barrett will be seen seated beside her colleagues for the first time next Monday. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Gail Trotter, spokeswoman for Judicial Crisis Network, joins me now on Skype. Gail, welcome back. So good to see you. Judicial Crisis Network has supported Justice Barrett's nomination really from the very beginning. What does her addition to the High Court represent from a legal perspective?
It is such a great moment for all Americans, and particularly those who understand how our constitutional system was set up, who are faithful to the Constitution and want to see the rule of law instead of rule by men. And I think it is a wonderful accomplishment of this president that he has elevated Judge Amy Coney Barrett to become Justice Amy Coney Barrett. And now we see this originalist philosophy, legal philosophy, on the court that has many adherents to it, and that's going to mean that instead of what the Democrats prefer, to have the Supreme Court become a super legislature, instead the court will continue to be what it should be, a body that is faithful to the Constitution, that interprets the laws, that doesn't try to change laws in the personal policy. preferences of the judges who happened to make up the court at that time. So it is really a victory for all Americans, and it is a victory particularly for those who really revere our system of government.
Gail, last night, Justice Barrett pledged to carry out her duties as a Supreme Court justice, quote, without any fear or favor towards the other branches of government or her own beliefs, something that we have heard from her repeatedly throughout her Senate confirmation hearings. What did you think of that statement, and what type of message do you think that sends to those who maybe still have their doubts about her?
That statement by Justice Barrett was an encapsulation of her legal philosophy and a commitment to being fair and independent. And it says right there that the federal judiciary is independent of political considerations, and that is something that she is making a commitment to. She has been committed to it all throughout her legal career. When she was elevated also to the Seventh Circuit Appellate Court, she was committed to that principle as well, and her ability to be on the court now will help the court make sure that it stays in the proper lane instead of becoming a super legislature. And I think Justice Barrett is so inspirational to so many people across the country, particularly women of faith, particularly women of faith who also value family, and her ability to accomplish all this with impeccable legal credentials, with extremely high intellect. She will be a force on this court for decades. And I think that you will see very well-reasoned opinions coming from her on the issues that are before the Supreme Court. And I think that she has a chance of being President Trump's greatest legacy from his first term.
Gail, you mentioned family, and I want to talk about that on a personal level. Justice Barrett is the first mother of school-age children to sit on the Supreme Court and only the fifth woman to do so. What do you think that moment represents for women and girls across the country?
It's a great moment because it represents for people of all faiths, but particularly women who care about their families, that they can choose how they want to live their lives. And the fact that there's this caricature of conservative women or women who support an originalist judicial philosophy, that they're not able to accomplish things, Justice Barrett stands in stark opposition to that principle. And her behavior, her composure before the Senate Judiciary Committee in her hearings, and her ability to go into very important distinctions of constitutional law without having any notes is very inspiring. To work hard at something that you care deeply about, and you can serve your country, you can serve your fellow countrymen, and you can be elevated to a position that is very inspiring to not only women across the country, but I think all Americans. And it is that ability to balance family and yet pursue excellence, which is an achievement that all of us can aspire to emulate.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Gail, for your time today. Gail Trotter, spokeswoman for Judicial Crisis Network. Thanks again, Gail.
Great to join you.
Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden quoted Pope Francis today during a campaign rally in Georgia. He criticized President Donald Trump for sowing division, while the president questioned Joe Biden's mental acuity. White House correspondent Owen Jensen is following both campaigns for us tonight. Owen?
President Donald Trump campaigning today in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Nebraska. Now, before he left the White House today on Marine One, he told reporters the media is not showing Joe Biden acting confused.
When he rushed to Pennsylvania and he did a statement and he got lost in a fog, they should show that, okay? Or they should show the picture where he called me George. He thought I was George. I guess he's talking about George Bush.
Meanwhile, in Georgia, which has not backed a Democrat for president in decades, Joe Biden brought up Pope Francis and politics.
Pope Francis warns us against this phony populism that appeals to, quote, the basest and most selfish instincts. He goes on to say, politics is something more noble than posturing, marketing, and media spin. These sow nothing but division, conflict, and oblique cynicism.
In Warm Springs, Joe Biden also went after the president's handling of the pandemic, which has been a main attack line for him on the campaign trail. And President Trump tweeted today, Joe Biden failed badly with the swine flu epidemic. Also tonight, First Lady Melania Trump making a campaign stop in Pennsylvania. Tracy?
White House correspondent Owen Jensen reporting for us tonight. Thank you so much, Owen. And coming up later in the show, a closer look at how then-Senator Biden helped to defeat an attempt to end legalized abortion. A terrorist bombing at a Muslim seminary in Pakistan has killed 8 students and injured over 130 people this morning. The powerful blast ripped through the school just as a senior scholar was giving a lecture on Islam. Police say the bomb went off after someone left a bag at the Islamic religious school. Several students are in critical condition, and doctors say the death toll could go up. The Prime Minister of Poland is defending the court's pro-life ruling that virtually bans all abortions. And he is also condemning the protest against the decision. The Constitutional Court ruled that abortions for fetal defects such as Down syndrome are unconstitutional. Abortion activists have protested every night since the court ruling last Thursday. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo pays respects to Indian soldiers killed in border skirmishes with China.
This morning, we visited the National War Memorial to honor the brave men and women of the Indian Armed Forces who have sacrificed for the world's largest democracy, including 20 that were killed by the PLA forces in the Galwan Valley in June.
Secretary Pompeo is visiting India along with Defense Secretary Mark Esper. They signed a deal to expand the sharing of military satellite information. Over the summer, India and China clashed over their shared border in the Himalayan mountains.
我们敦促蓬佩奥摒弃冷战零和思维。
China's foreign ministry is urging Secretary Pompeo to stop criticizing the communist nation. A spokesman says the secretary should not continue to hype the threat from China. He also demanded the U.S. revoke the sale of missiles to Taiwan. Yesterday, China announced sanctions on Boeing for the arms sale. After 4 years, Pope Francis has named a new leader for the nearly 300,000 Latin Catholics in a region in the Middle East. Archbishop Pier Battista Pizzaballa is the new Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem. He says his priorities include addressing the unemployment and uncertainty felt by the faithful amid COVID-19 lockdowns. Joining us now is EWTN Newsroom correspondent Colin Flynn. Colin, welcome back. So good to see you. So what can you tell us about the Archbishop?
Good evening, Tracy. Well, I can tell you that Archbishop Pizzaballa is 55 years of age, and although he's Italian, for the past 30 years, 3 decades, he has lived in Jerusalem. In fact, he moved there just 1 month after becoming a Franciscan in 1990. And the interesting thing, Tracy, about the situation is that for the past 4 years, Latin Catholics in Israel, in the Palestinian territories, in Jordan and Cyprus, they have not had a patriarch after the previous one resigned due to old age in 2016. So this is something that really they're excited about, and they welcome this decision and this appointment by Pope Francis. Now, he appointed him as the new patriarch last week at a special event here in the Vatican. Coincidentally, it was on the centenary of the consecration of Palestine to Mary. And there at the event, EWTN's Alan Holdren met with the new patriarch, and he asked him what the situation was like in the Holy Land at the moment.
From the political perspective, the situation is a situation of more tension, unfortunately. But the positive aspect is, at least among us Christians, we have a better understanding.
Colin, do you know why did this appointment take so long, and what will his priorities be in this new role?
Well, as I mentioned, Tracy, the last patriarch resigned in 2016. Pope Francis accepted his resignation then. And in those 4 years, Archbishop Pizzaballa has been acting as the apostolic administrator. Now, the reason he waited 4 years as apostolic administrator before being announced as the new patriarch is because really the patriarchate in Jerusalem was in deep financial trouble. It was almost $100 million in debt. So Pope Francis really put him in that position as the apostolic administrator to focus on restructuring the Patriarchate financially. He brought in professional companies to help him do that. He brought in international donations. They sold some property to get the Patriarchate out of the red and into the black. So now that that has been taken care of, the financial situation, his priorities, he told EWTN News Now, is that he wants to be someone who can bring people together, to be a bridge builder there in the Holy Land, in a place where there is so much division and tensions between different groups. He wants to bring communities on different political backgrounds and religious backgrounds together. He said that he wants them to see what they have in common rather than them focus on the differences between them.
Coleman, finally, can you remind us why the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem is so important?
Well, Tracy, as the Patriarch now, he will be in charge of all the Latin Catholics in the Holy Land. And really, a Patriarch is a form of bishop. It's one of the highest forms of bishop in the world, and it dates all the way back to 325 AD. The word patriarch, the meaning is really father or leader of a family. And it's someone that can, again, bring people together, can build bridges. It's often a political role as well in regions like Jerusalem, where there's, again, a lot of tensions, a lot of fractures in communities. So this is something that will be in his role, bringing people together, being that bridge builder.
Well, Colin Flynn, EWTN Newsroom correspondent, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tracy.
Coming up, a city in Texas struggles with a spike in coronavirus cases. And a report says Vatican officials are making a request of Pope Francis. We'll explain. The Bishop of El Paso, Texas, is asking for prayers plus smaller masses as cases of COVID-19 are surging, and the mayor warns that hospitals are getting overwhelmed.
We've got 4 tents, pressurized tents set up at hospitals for overflow, and we're looking at an alternate care site at our convention center, which will set up with 50 beds, and then it could be expanded to 100, but it's not good.
The mayor also says that 37% of cases earlier this month were traced back to big box stores and shopping in El Paso, but only the governor can impose lockdown restrictions. The head of the Tokyo Olympics is considering an infectious disease control center to monitor athletes. Organizers are also discussing plans for those who test positive. The Tokyo Olympics were postponed until next summer because of the coronavirus pandemic. Doctors in Spain walked off the job today in their first national strike in 25 years. They are protesting against poor working conditions and say the coronavirus pandemic has exposed problems in Spain's healthcare system. In Italy, the army is teaming up with hospitals to carry out testing for COVID-19. The Italian Defense Forces have an agreement with the health ministry to set up 200 drive-through testing centers. They can handle about 400 cars a day. Italy reported 17,000 new cases just yesterday and another 141 deaths. The Associated Press says the Vatican is reportedly trying to convince Pope Francis to wear a mask in public. The Holy Father did not wear one at his public meeting at the Vatican last Wednesday. A half dozen bishops who greeted him also did not wear masks. New Vatican regulations require face masks to be worn inside. Up next, church officials in Venezuela are preparing for a historic ceremony. With 1 week into Election Day tonight, we take a look at Democratic candidate for President Joe Biden and his support of Roe versus Wade throughout the years. Joining us now by Skype is Paul Kengor, author and professor of political science at Grove City College in Grove City, Pennsylvania. Paul, welcome back. Always good to see you. Let's talk about the commentary that you wrote and was published in a National Catholic Register. In it, you focused on the landmark case Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which in part removed the requirement of spousal notification prior to obtaining an abortion. You also mentioned the role that then Delaware Senator Joe Biden played in the case during that time. Let's talk about that and why you felt it was so important to discuss.
Yeah, I've known about this for years, Tracy. So I've known about Joe Biden for years. I've followed Biden for years, going back to the 1980s, late 80s when I was in college. And I happened to read over 10 years ago now at this point, Senator Warren Rudman's memoirs. I'm probably the only person watching this right now who read Senator Rudman's memoirs. But he notes in there about the date June 29th, 1992, this dramatic moment. This is really odd. But he's at the Amtrak station in Wilmington, Delaware, and he looks down and he spots Joe Biden, Senator Biden, and Rudman was from New Hampshire, and he waves to him, and they smile and they wave at one another, and they literally run into one another's arms, hugging, embracing, smiling, jumping up and down, and he says, "I told you I was right about David. I told you I was right about David." And Biden says, yes. And who's this David that they're talking about, Tracy? It's David Souter, Justice David Souter, who was the crucial swing vote in the Planned Parenthood v. Casey decision in 1992, which preserved Roe v. Wade. And that was the one court case which might possibly have overturned Roe, or at least would have come closer than any other. Tracy, it was a 5-4 decision. It was written by Anthony Kennedy. By the way, these were all Reagan and Bush appointees. Anthony Kennedy, who wrote the so-called mystery clause in that decision, Sandra Day O'Connor, and Souter. And so Souter was a swing vote. It was a 5-4 vote. And so that changed it. And very, very important to note here, Biden's role in this. Biden was the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and they had shot down Robert Bork. They had given Clarence Thomas a really hard time. Well, Biden shepherded through the Souter nomination. George H.W. Bush had nominated Souter, and people weren't sure how Souter was going to vote, if he was pro-life, if he was pro-choice. And Rudman assured Biden privately, hey, he's okay. He's one of us. And Biden pushed him through the committee 14-3. Now, I say that now, a week after the Senate Judiciary Committee, not a single Democrat voted for Amy Coney Barrett in committee or on the floor. And in fact, Souter went to the floor of the Senate and was voted 90-9 overwhelmingly. And so that's why Biden and Rudman were so ecstatic, literally hugging and embracing that day, June 29th, 1992, because they had saved Roe versus Wade. And I want people to know about that. I want people to know about that encounter. Not many people do.
Paul, we don't have a lot of time, but I do want to talk about the impact that case, the decision of that case, has had.
Yeah, so I mean that was the case above all. I mean, if you had gotten, let's say an Amy Coney Barrett or somebody like that in that position instead of David Souter, it would have went 5-4 the other way. In fact, my good friend Bill Clark, I was his biographer, and he was Reagan's closest advisor. He almost got the seat that went to Sandra Day O'Connor. Had he taken that seat, it probably would have went 6-3. It was named for Casey, who was Governor Casey of Pennsylvania, really one of the last major pro-life Democrats in the country. So that was a landmark decision. There was no question about it. And it's really fair to say that Joe Biden helped ensure that.
Paul, in your opinion, what's at stake here in this election for Catholics and Americans as a whole?
Well, the court is paramount. And having finally gotten a majority, arguably a pro-life majority on the Supreme Court, that may not overturn Roe versus Wade, but at least would lead to some victories, Tracy, for groups like Little Sisters of the Poor, Hobby Lobby, the Conestoga Woods case, the Bladensburg Cross case, some of these crucial cases. And so if that is lost, and above all, lost by a candidate who wants to pack the court, I mean, I'm genuinely surprised and shocked that Joe Biden seems to possibly support that, or at the least refuses to reject it. So if all of that is lost by a new president who packs the court and suddenly adds 3 or 4 seats, 3 or 4 David Souter, 3 or 4 Ruth Bader Ginsburgs, But you would suddenly lose all the momentum, all the hard work gained the last 20 to 30 years to make this what is now finally, quite possibly, barely a majority pro-life Supreme Court.
Well, Paul, thanks so much for your time. We got to leave it right there. Paul Kengor, author and professor of political science at Grove City College in Grove City, Pennsylvania. Always good to see you, Paul.
Thanks, Tracy.
Church officials in Venezuela are beginning the beatification process for the first Venezuelan layperson. Forensic scientists exhumed the remains of Dr. Jose Gregorio Hernandez, also known as the Doctor of the Poor. The Vatican is planning his beatification next year. He was declared venerable in 1986 by Pope John Paul II. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.